Have you ever felt invisible, even when you're surrounded by the people who should know you best? Have you ever sat quietly at a family gathering, stirring cold coffee as someone else effortlessly takes the spotlight, overshadowing every little thing you've done? If you have, then you'll understand exactly how I felt that Sunday morning when my sister's laughter echoed across our usual brunch spot, piercing the gentle buzz of conversation around us. What Vivian, my older sister, didn't realize as she mocked me publicly, laughing about my so-called lack of a real job, was that very soon she'd discover the person quietly signing her paychecks was the same woman she had spent years dismissing, her younger sister Jessica. But the moment she found out wouldn't lead to revenge or humiliation. Instead, it would become a profound turning point in both of our lives. It was the start of something deeper, more valuable than a simple apology. It became a journey of humility, respect, and ultimately, quiet redemption. That morning, as I sat in my usual corner of the cafe, sunlight filtering gently through the tall glass windows, my untouched coffee had long gone cold. I kept stirring it absent-mindedly, listening to Vivian's voice as she effortlessly held court. At 35, Vivian was everything our family admired. Charming, confident, and always ready with a perfectly timed joke, even if it meant I was often the punchline. Jessica's job was such a snooze fest, Vivian laughed, waving a hand theatrically, the diamond on her finger catching the sunlight. Honestly, can you imagine still struggling to find real work at 32? My mother shifted uncomfortably, murmuring a weak protest. Vivian, don't say things like that. But the words were barely audible over my sister's laughter. My father quickly changed the subject to the overly salty eggs Benedict, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. Yet Vivian's smirk lingered, hovering in the air like an unspoken challenge. I said nothing. I rarely did at these gatherings. Silence had become my shield over the years, a place where I retreated when the world seemed too loud or too harsh. But behind that quiet facade, there was something Vivian and the rest of my family couldn't see. A hidden world built carefully, patiently, and without fanfare. Years before this brunch, I had learned an invaluable lesson. Sometimes the most powerful things in life are those we create quietly, out of view. At 27, in a cramped apartment with my college friend Sam, I typed the first lines of code for what would eventually become Dataloom, an analytics company valued at over $80 million. But unlike Vivian's art exhibitions or TV appearances, my achievements were always behind the scenes, quiet yet impactful. Now at 32, as Vivian proudly discussed her application to join a promising company named Dataloom, totally unaware of its creator, I hid a small smile behind my coffee cup. She had no idea how closely our lives were about to collide, or that the very shadows she mocked would soon illuminate a truth far more powerful than either of us could have imagined. As I watched her from across the table, I knew I stood at a crossroads. Would I finally step into the light to claim recognition? Or would the strength of my silence guide us both to something much greater than revenge? Understanding. This is my story, a story of quiet strength, late realizations, and the unexpected power of silent forgiveness. Have you ever been in a crowded room, yet somehow felt utterly invisible? It was one of those bright Sunday mornings, and I was sitting quietly in our usual brunch spot, gently stirring a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Around me, my family was chatting, smiling, and laughing, but all eyes were fixed, as always, on my older sister Vivian. Vivian had a way of capturing everyone's attention effortlessly. Confident, charismatic, and quick with a witty remark, she was used to being center stage. As she laughed, her voice carried clearly across the table, and I felt my stomach twist slightly in anticipation of what was inevitably coming next. Honestly, Jessica's old job was such a snooze fest, Vivian announced, waving her manicured hand dramatically. Can you imagine being in your early 30s and still not having a real job? A few awkward chuckles broke the silence, but mostly there was uncomfortable shifting. Mom quickly murmured something gentle in protest. Vivian, honey, let's not do this today. While Dad tried his best to steer the conversation to the eggs Benedict being slightly too salty. But Vivian's words lingered like an uncomfortable echo, suspended above the table, waiting for my reaction. Yet I stayed quiet. I'd learned long ago that silence can sometimes speak louder than words, especially when the words you're tempted to say won't help anyone grow. In that moment, I recalled a time in college when a professor once said something I've never forgotten. True strength isn't found in having the last word. It's found in knowing when words aren't needed. Vivian saw my silence as proof of defeat, unaware that behind the scenes, away from her spotlight, I'd quietly been building something extraordinary. Something powerful, something real. She couldn't see beyond the quiet girl stirring her cold coffee. She had no idea that this same quiet girl had secretly created a successful tech company, one she'd soon be applying to work for. I smiled softly to myself, not out of spite, but because I understood something Vivian hadn't learned yet. Real power doesn't demand attention, it thrives in quiet confidence. Little did she know, everything was about to change. And soon, Vivian would discover that the sister she'd overlooked for years was silently holding the key to her future. But before I tell you exactly how that happened, let me take you back to the very beginning, back to a childhood that shaped the paths we both chose. Growing up, our differences were clear from the start, like two pieces of the same puzzle that just didn't seem to fit. Vivian was vibrant, charismatic, always ready to sparkle. She was like a firework, exploding with color, captivating everyone with her energy. And me? Well, Dad liked to joke. If Vivian is our family's firework, Jessica's our flashlight. Steady, reliable, and usually overlooked. I didn't fully understand what he meant back then. I only knew that while Vivian thrived on applause and attention, I found joy in quiet discoveries, like dismantling an old radio to see how it worked, or sitting patiently for hours figuring out why a computer game ran so smoothly. My satisfaction came not from applause, but from the simple thrill of understanding how things connected beneath the surface. I still vividly remember my 12th birthday. Everyone gathered around the kitchen table, the candles flickering warmly atop my chocolate cake. Just as my family began singing, "Happy Birthday," Vivian burst into the room, proudly holding up a giant gold trophy. Our Vivian just won the state dance championship. Mom announced, beaming, completely forgetting mid-song that we were celebrating another milestone, mine. All eyes immediately shifted to Vivian, showering her with praise. And me? I stood there awkwardly, birthday candles still glowing, feeling as invisible as ever. Nobody asked me what I wished for that day, and I didn't bother blowing out the candles. Instead, I quietly slipped away to my bedroom, opened the old laptop Dad had given me, and began typing my first lines of code. That evening taught me something important. It was a small, quiet lesson, one of those truths you carry with you for life. Just because you're not noticed doesn't mean you're not valuable. The spotlight, though warm and inviting, can be fleeting. Real value, real power, often exists quietly, in spaces others overlook. For instance, think about some of the greatest innovations of our time, like Steve Wozniak quietly crafting Apple's first computers behind Steve Jobs' flashy presentations. Or countless unsung heroes behind your favorite technology, the quiet masterminds whose names rarely appear in headlines, yet whose work touches millions of lives every day. That was my world, quiet, steady, meaningful. Over time, I realized that being the flashlight wasn't a weakness. It was my strength. My role wasn't to dazzle but to illuminate, to reveal hidden paths that others couldn't see clearly. Vivian and I grew further apart through the years. She pursued art and acting, shining brightly in local media, while I chose computer science, attending a small technical institute nobody in my family could even remember the name of. My graduation day came and went quietly, overshadowed by Vivian's glamorous fashion line launch party, planned on the same weekend. But despite our differences, I never resented her spotlight. Instead, I quietly built something powerful in the shadows, something no one in my family, especially Vivian, could ever have imagined. And that quiet determination would soon create a moment neither of us saw coming. An unexpected collision of worlds, with Vivian unknowingly stepping into a future shaped entirely by my hidden strength. But before we get to that pivotal moment, let me first share how I quietly built my hidden empire. When people talk about success, they often imagine big stages, flashing lights, or viral headlines. But what if I told you that some of the most impactful things in the world are built in silence? Away from applause, away from recognition, even away from family. That was exactly how I built mine. It started in a tiny apartment just outside Capitol Hill in Seattle. I was 27, living paycheck to paycheck, and sharing a cramped workspace with Sam, my best friend from college. We didn't have fancy desks or ergonomic chairs, just 2 beat-up laptops and a shared dream: to build an intelligent data analytics platform that could actually help people make better decisions in real time. While Sam handled pitches and investor meetings, I stayed behind the scenes, coding through the night, debugging while the world slept. I wasn't the kind of person who felt comfortable in boardrooms or on magazine covers. What I loved was solving problems, quietly, carefully, and thoroughly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. I still remember our first breakthrough. We'd been working on a predictive model for months, and one night, just after midnight, I watched it finally run perfectly, forecasting user behavior with stunning accuracy. No audience, no celebration, just the soft hum of my laptop fan and the glow of the screen. But in that silence, something profound happened. I realized I didn't need validation. I needed purpose. Fast forward 1 year, and a major bank signed a trial contract with our platform. 2 years later, our system had been integrated into healthcare, finance, and risk analysis services nationwide. By year 3, the company we named Dataloom was valued at over $80 million. And yet, almost no one knew my name. Sam became the face of the company, attending tech conferences, giving interviews, even being featured in Forbes. That was the plan from day one. We agreed he'd handle the spotlight, while I focused on building the actual system that powered it all. Even our employees didn't know I was a co-founder. To them, I was just Eleanor, the quiet senior technical advisor who worked mostly remote and dropped by the office after 6 p.m. Some might think I missed out on the fame, but the truth is, I didn't want it. I'd seen what constant exposure does to people. Fame can blur your vision, distract you from the work, and pull you away from what matters. I wanted freedom, not attention. And you know what's funny? While my family still thought I was just freelancing from home, brushing off my career as typing on computers, the very sister who mocked me the most was unknowingly applying to work for the company I had helped build from scratch. There's something incredibly powerful about building in silence. No one expects you. No one watches you. But when the moment comes, you move mountains before they even realize you're holding the earth. And that moment, it was coming. Vivian had just lost her job. She was job hunting. And one afternoon during brunch, she casually mentioned she had just applied to a new tech company. The name. Something like Dataloom, she said with a shrug, sipping her mimosa. Heard they're hiring. I already sent in my application, should be a breeze. I nearly choked on my coffee. She had no idea. And I just smiled quietly and stirred my cup. But before we get to what happened when Vivian walked into the very company I created, let me tell you what it felt like to see her name pop up in our hiring system. How I wrestled with silence, power, and the strangest twist of fate I never saw coming. Sometimes life has a funny way of setting the stage for a story you never expected to tell. 4 years I stayed quiet, working behind the scenes, building my company with care and intention, content with letting others take the credit. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment my past and present collided in the most ironic way. It happened on a Sunday. Same old brunch spot, same sunlit table, same Vivian, still talking louder than anyone else. She was in high spirits that day, though I knew things hadn't been going well. Her fashion line had folded 2 years earlier, and after bouncing between a few accounting roles, she'd recently been laid off from a small firm. Still, she held her head high, brushing it all off with a confident smirk. "I've already applied to a new place," she said, waving her phone around like a trophy. "Some tech company, Dataloom or whatever it's called. They'd be lucky to have me. I've got experience they probably don't even know they need." Froze. She kept talking, completely unaware of the flicker in my eyes. "I hear their founders are super secretive," she went on. "No one knows who the second co-founder even is. Might just be a legal placeholder or something." I almost laughed, but not out of mockery. It was the kind of laugh you feel when life hands you a full-circle moment on a silver platter. That night, back in my apartment, I sat down at my desk, logged into Dataloom's internal HR portal, And sure enough, there she was. Vivian Green. Beige blazer in her profile photo. Confident smile. Application complete. And the review. Strong communicator. Confident. Well suited for the budget analyst role. I hovered over the file for a moment. Heart surprisingly calm. No anger, no resentment. Just the quiet weight of something poetic unfolding. I didn't hesitate. I clicked the 3 little dots in the corner. And with a single breath I hit approve. You see, this was never about revenge. I didn't want to embarrass her. I didn't need her to beg for forgiveness or see me as some secret genius. What I wanted, what I hoped for, was something far more human. To see who she would become when the spotlight wasn't on her, when she had no idea anyone was watching. It's a moment many of us don't think about. How we behave when we believe no one of importance is paying attention. But I've learned that character doesn't show up in big speeches or award ceremonies. It shows up in the hallway, in how we treat colleagues, in how we own our mistakes or take credit too quickly. And now, Vivian was walking straight into a space I had built. Every process, every report, every number she'd work with had my fingerprints on it. But she didn't know that. Not yet. From my position behind the scenes I kept watching. Not out of pride but curiosity. I turned on the internal camera system I'd helped design. And there she was on her first day. Standing in the shared kitchen on the 9th floor, wide-eyed and eager. "This place is going to be my comeback," she told a colleague near the espresso machine. I just smiled softly from my office miles away. Little did she know, her journey was no longer just about building a new career. It was about confronting something much deeper. The truth she'd spent her life ignoring. And that truth, it was waiting for her. Hidden in the signature line of every file, quietly whispering the name she thought she'd already figured out. Jessica. But before she uncovered it, there was something she needed to show me first. Something no resume or interview could reveal. Who was Vivian without the audience? And what would she do when the truth finally surfaced? Let's find out. Secrets have a strange way of revealing themselves. Often not through drama, but through the quiet details that slip through the cracks. And for Vivian, the truth about who she was working for didn't hit all at once. It came slowly, like morning fog lifting, just enough to see what's always been there. It had been nearly 2 months since Vivian joined Dataloom. To everyone else, she was doing well. Confident in meetings, charming in conversation, and surprisingly good with numbers. I watched from a distance, approving budgets late at night, slipping in and out of the office long after most had gone home. Our schedules never overlapped. On purpose. But then, it started. One afternoon I received a soft ping on my internal dashboard. System alert. Internal access request. Vivian Green, budget history files. Curious. That evening, I overheard a snippet of conversation in the cafe downstairs. A young colleague asked Vivian, "Hey, do you know who this NS person is? The one who signs off on everything. Like a ghost in the system." Vivian laughed. "Probably just a legal figurehead. I don't trust names without faces." I tightened my grip on my coffee cup. Still so certain. Still unwilling to look beyond the obvious. But Vivian was no fool. A few days later, she walked into accounting and requested full access to the financial record of the last quarter. With her clearance level, it didn't take long before she began noticing something unusual. My name, Jessica M. Green, appearing again and again. Not just on expense approvals, but on legal contracts, architectural memos, and internal strategy reports. And beside my name, co-founder. The next morning I received another alert. Vivian Green accessed founding records. She had found it. The master file. The truth. I could picture her in the dim office light, reading through the lines of our original registration documents. Jessica M. Green, Chief Technical Architect, 50% ownership. Sam Fletcher, CEO, 50% ownership. The same Jessica she thought was unemployed, unremarkable, invisible. I didn't need a camera to know her reaction. I knew my sister. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went very, very still. When Vivian's world flips, she doesn't fall apart, She recalculates. First comes the silence, then the questions, then the fight to make sense of it all. And that afternoon, I arrived at the office early. I didn't plan to, but something told me I needed to be there. Sure enough, as I stepped into the hallway near the server room, I heard the sharp echo of heels. Turned, and there she was. Vivian froze in the doorway, eyes wide, as if she'd seen a ghost. "Jessica?" she asked, voice tight. I gave a calm nod. What are you doing down here? This floor is restricted. Only senior management." "I have access," I said simply. "Special access." She squinted, still trying to connect the pieces. Then Sam appeared from the side room, holding a folder. "Hey Jess, can you take a look at the AI deployment plan before Friday?" I took the folder without breaking eye contact with Vivian. And in that moment the air changed. Her face didn't show anger. It showed something far more powerful, realization. There was no need for grand speeches. The seed of doubt had been planted. And now, as it grew, she would have to face a truth much bigger than a job title or a paycheck. She had underestimated me for years. And now, standing in the space I had quietly built, she had to ask herself the hardest question. Who really was her little sister? Sometimes, the most humbling moments in life don't come from failure. They come from finally seeing someone you thought you already knew, and realizing you never truly looked. But the story doesn't end there. Because the real test wasn't whether Vivian would believe the truth. It was how she would respond to it. And what happened next, even I didn't see coming. But before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. How would you feel if someone you dismissed turned out to be quietly leading your path? Would it shake you, humble you, inspire you? Let me know in the comments below. And now, let's step into the next chapter of this unfolding story. And now, before we continue with Jessica's remarkable journey, let's pause for a moment. I'd love to hear from you. How would you feel if you suddenly discovered someone you've underestimated your whole life was actually quietly holding the keys to your success? Would you feel shocked, embarrassed, proud, or maybe something else entirely? Drop a quick comment below sharing your honest feelings. Your insights mean a lot, and it helps us grow together through these real, heartfelt experiences. Now, let's dive back in and see how Jessica handled this delicate, transformative moment. Some people think strength means raising your voice, standing tall, making a statement. But I've learned that real strength, the kind that leaves a lasting mark, is often quiet. It's the kind that doesn't demand attention. Just is. After that encounter in the hallway, I knew Vivian had found the truth. I could see it in her face. The whirlwind of questions she didn't know how to ask, the pride bruised by years of assumptions. But I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't even need her to understand everything right away. I just needed to make a choice. Would I use this moment to prove something? Or to offer something? That evening, I sat at my desk and pulled out a proposal I'd been working on for weeks. It was a new initiative at Dataloom, something close to my heart. A program to bring tech education to underprivileged youth, especially girls who felt invisible in rooms filled with louder voices. I printed out the outline, placed it in a folder, and slipped it into my bag. The next morning, I found Vivian in the break room, standing alone. She didn't say much, just watched me cautiously, her usual sharpness replaced with quiet confusion. I walked up, handed her the folder and said softly, "We're launching this soon. I think you'd be a great fit if you're interested." She looked down at the folder, then back at me, eyes searching. "You're not angry?" I smiled gently. "No, Vivian. I'm not." That was it. No lecture. No power play. Just an open door. Because here's what I know. You don't build people by breaking them. You build them by showing who they can become, especially when they least expect kindness. In life, we're often given chances to be right. But sometimes being kind is more powerful than being right. That moment wasn't about proving I had succeeded. It was about proving I had grown. Think about it. How many of us carry the desire to be seen, not just for the roles we play, but for who we truly are? And how often do we miss the opportunity to extend that same grace to others? Vivian didn't say much that day. But her silence felt different this time. It wasn't the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of reflection. And that was enough. Because the next part of this story isn't about me at all. It's about Vivian, and what she chose to do after the truth settled in. And what she did surprised even me. Me show you. Change doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it begins with a pause. A long, uncomfortable silence where pride softens and reflection takes root. After I handed Vivian that folder, I didn't expect a miracle. I wasn't waiting for a thank you or a dramatic apology. I simply hoped she'd take the opportunity seriously. And in the days that followed, something shifted. She stopped talking just to fill the room. She started listening. In meetings, Vivian no longer leaned back with arms crossed or tossed in surface-level opinions. She came prepared. She took notes, asked thoughtful questions. When one of the interns struggled to present a budget projection, Vivian didn't correct her in front of everyone like she once might have. Instead, she quietly stayed after the meeting, walking the young woman through the numbers step by step. I watched it all, not as her sister, not even as her boss, but as a witness to something rare, the quiet unfolding of humility. Then, one afternoon, a proposal landed on my desk. It was from Vivian. Title: Touch the Screen, Touch the Future. Objective: a mentorship initiative for junior employees, especially young women in tech. Purpose: to provide support, encouragement, and visibility to those who often go unseen. And at the bottom, in small italic letters, inspired by the quiet mission of Jessica M. Green. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. She hadn't just changed jobs. She had changed her perspective. You know, it's easy to write someone off, especially when we think we've already figured them out. We hold on to old images of who they were, sometimes refusing to believe they could ever grow past them. But growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers in the little things. A softened tone, a revised behavior, a quiet credit where once there would have been ego. Vivian wasn't perfect. Neither am I. But she was trying, not to impress anyone, not to climb, but to understand. And that's when I realized we weren't standing on opposite sides anymore. We were standing side by side, learning, healing, and becoming something new. And soon, she would prove just how far she'd come. Because at our company's 5-year anniversary gala, Vivian would finally see me not as the sister she once mocked, but as the woman she could respect. And for the first time I was ready to step into the light, not to shine but to stand tall. Let me take you there. For 5 years I had built a world from behind the curtain. I was the silent architect of systems, strategies, and structures that powered an entire company. Yet no one outside a select few ever saw my name on a press release or a stage. And I was okay with that, truly. But when our team started planning Dataloom's 5-year anniversary gala, Sam pulled me aside and said, "Jess, it's time. Not to make a scene. Not for the applause. Just to be seen." I was hesitant at first. Not because I was afraid, but because visibility had never been my goal. I didn't want the spotlight. But I realized sometimes we don't show up for ourselves. We show up so others can see what quiet strength looks like. So that night, I stood in the guest dressing room of a glass building overlooking Lake Union. I wore a simple black dress. My hair was pinned back. My hands, slightly shaky, held nothing but calm. I wasn't trying to stand out, but maybe for once I didn't need to hide. As Sam and I walked onto the stage, the lights dimmed. The MC announced, "Please welcome the co-founders of Dataloom, Samuel Fletcher and Jessica M. Green." There it was. Name. Spoken out loud. Applause followed. Warm, genuine, not overwhelming, but enough to make me pause. I stepped forward, took the microphone with both hands, and smiled softly. "Hi everyone. I'm Jessica. And I guess for many of you, this is the first time you've actually seen me." There was a small ripple of laughter. Gentle, kind. Continued. 5 years ago, Sam and I started this company with nothing but a pair of old laptops and an idea. That data, when used wisely, could help people make better choices, not just for profit but for people. I chose to stay behind the scenes because I've always believed that the work should speak louder than the person behind it. But tonight, I wanted to be here. Not for recognition, but out of gratitude. I looked out into the audience, scanning the room. And there, near the back, stood Vivian. She wasn't clapping. She wasn't smiling. She was just still. One hand holding a champagne glass she hadn't touched. Her eyes locked on mine, wide with a kind of stunned clarity I'd never seen before. She wasn't seeing her little sister anymore. She was seeing me. That's when I learned something. The moment you step into the light, it's not about proving who you are. It's about honoring the journey it took to get there. After the speech, as people mingled and congratulated Sam and me, I kept catching glimpses of Vivian across the room. She never approached. She slipped out before the night ended, quietly. But that was okay. Because this wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. What came next wasn't a celebration. It wasn't applause. It was something far more meaningful. A handwritten card, a small notebook, and the soft beginning of forgiveness. Let me show you what happened next. Forgiveness doesn't always come with tears, long speeches, or dramatic hugs. Sometimes, it comes in a simple gesture. A folded card. Quiet pause. A heart that finally sees clearly. 2 days after the gala, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Not for a meeting, not to review numbers, but to leave something behind. I walked into the 10th floor conference room, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small walnut box I'd kept since college. Inside it was a navy blue linen-covered notebook, a black fountain pen, and a handwritten card I had taken over an hour to write. Just a few lines, nothing fancy. Vivian, thank you for your efforts at Dataloom. You are truly capable, and I believe you'll go far. I'm proud to work with you, even if we began in silence. Jessica. No sender name on the envelope. No expectations. Just an open door. I handed the box to the internal assistant and quietly said, "Please deliver this to Vivian Green's desk." No rush. I wasn't trying to fix the past. I wasn't looking for validation. I just wanted her to know, I see you. Forgive you. I believe in who you're becoming. And for a while, I heard nothing. But then something changed. Vivian started leaning in during meetings. Not to dominate, but to contribute. She listened more than she spoke. When junior team members struggled, she offered support. Gently, respectfully. She stopped seeking attention and started seeking impact. One day, I happened to walk past a meeting room just as she was presenting a revised strategy for a project that had gone over budget. Her tone was calm. Her words were precise. She credited her team before herself. I didn't go in. I just stood quietly in the hallway and smiled. You see, forgiveness isn't always about the past. Sometimes it's an invitation to the future, a way to say, we can start again if we choose to. And Vivian, she chose. Not long after, I received a proposal from her titled, Touch the Screen, Touch the Future. A mentorship program for young women in tech, funded through Dataloom's CSR budget. It was bold, thoughtful, and deeply personal. And at the bottom of the proposal, in soft gray print, she had written, Inspired by the quiet mission of Jessica M. Green. That line, just 10 words, meant more to me than any apology ever could. Because in that moment, I knew she didn't just know who I was. She finally saw me. And sometimes that's all we really want. Not to win, not to be worshipped. Just to be seen, understood, and quietly, completely forgiven. But there was still one final chapter to write. And this time, it wasn't in a tech boardroom or a gala stage. It was back where it all started. Over coffee, eggs Benedict, and a Sunday brunch that would never be the same again. Let me take you there. It was a Sunday morning like any other. Same familiar table by the window. Same scent of warm waffles drifting through the air. Same sunlight dancing through striped curtains. But this time, something was different. I arrived early as I usually did, choosing my quiet spot near the edge of the table. My parents were already there. Dad skimming the menu as if he didn't already know he'd order the same thing. Mom chatting softly about her new flower bed. Uncle Henry, Aunt Laura, and a few cousins trickled in. And then, 5 minutes late, Vivian walked in. No flashy dress, no dramatic entrance, just a simple white blouse, dark jeans, her hair tied neatly back. No makeup, no fanfare. Just her. Our eyes met briefly. She hesitated for half a second, then gave a soft nod. I nodded back. That was all we needed. We sat, we talked, we laughed about safe things. Weather, travel, someone's dog. For the first time in a long while, there was no tension pressing into the pauses. Just space. Open, unforced. And then, midway through Mom's story about a squirrel eating her tulips, Uncle Henry turned to me and said with a chuckle, "So Jessica, are you still doing that little freelance thing from home? Or just tinkering with those computer games of yours?" I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could speak, Vivian set down her coffee and said clearly, "Uncle, Jessica is the smartest person I've ever known. Without her, I wouldn't even have the career I have today." The whole table went quiet. She didn't look at me, she didn't need to. Her voice was steady. True. I used to think being the loudest meant being the strongest," she continued. "But Jessica taught me something more important. That quiet doesn't mean small. It means steady, focused, powerful. She doesn't show off because she doesn't need to. She builds." Uncle Henry blinked. Aunt Laura gave a small nod. "And Mom." She reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. In that moment, no one clapped. No one cried. But I felt something shift. Respect not demanded, but earned. Love not shouted, but shown. Understanding not through apologies, but through growth. After brunch, as we stood up to leave, Vivian walked past me, jacket in hand. She didn't stop. But as she passed, she whispered, "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never be the same person again." Smiled. "I know," I said. "And I never needed you to apologize." We stepped outside into the soft spring sunlight, walking side by side in comfortable silence. And that's the thing about healing. It doesn't always happen with big moments. Sometimes it happens in the quiet. In the space between pride and peace. In the small nods, the changed behavior, the effort to be better. That afternoon I went home, made myself a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and stared out the window toward Lake Union. The breeze was gentle, and the world felt lighter. Just as I took a sip, a message from Sam popped up. "Heard brunch wasn't half bad today." I replied with a small smile. "Not bad at all. Let's call it a new beginning." Because sometimes, forgiveness doesn't need words. It simply needs two people willing to meet again. Not where they left off, but where they're ready to begin. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to Jessica's inspiring journey. If there's one lesson we can take away from her story, it's this. True strength doesn't shout for attention. It quietly changes the world from behind the scenes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever been underestimated, or perhaps realized you've misjudged someone? Let me know your reflections in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more meaningful stories like this one. Until next time, stay inspired.